Yeah. Yeah, people can filter in. Well, why don't we get started, because 1 hour goes by real quick and we've already lost a few minutes. For those of you who are here, welcomes for being here today, taking your Sunday to dedicate yourself to this very important issue. In this session, we're going to talk about social movements. And the very reason we're doing so is because we need to see climate as a social movement. We talked about that throughout the day today. We need more people with us. We need a movement of people to really make progress on climate in the name of health. And so how can we learn from what other social movements have done to be successful? What can we learn from their trials? What can we learn from their tribulations? What can we learn from the way that they've organized and pushed their issue through? So that's what this session is about. My name is Meighen Speiser. I'm with ecoAmerica. We are a nonprofit that works in the United States to help move society towards climate solutions, because we truly believe that the missing link to action on solutions are the social solutions. And so we work with the health community, and we also work with denominations of faith, and also with local communities as well. And our whole reason for being is help to bring the 40% or more of Americans who are concerned about climate change, but don't feel invited by the environmental movement to bring them in and to provide them pathways for action so that we can all do more, faster, better. So that's what we do. We have 3 programs. Climate for Health is our health program. We also do campaigns and a training as well. So more on us at ecoamerica.org. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce our session and our speakers. And thank you for those who just joined us. We have Dr. Gerald Durley is joining us here remotely, and thank you so much for doing so. He was a student leader in the civil rights movement in the early 60s at Tennessee State University. He graduated in 1964 as also the SGA president and the captain of the basketball team. He was among the first Peace Corps volunteers to go to Nigeria before playing basketball in Switzerland. And Dr. Durley returned to the United States deeply engaged in the movement for civil rights. He earned a master's in community mental health from Northern Illinois College, a doctorate in urban education and psychology from the University of Massachusetts, and a Master of Divinity from Harvard University. So he was a pastor of Providence Missionary Baptist Church in Atlanta for 25 years and is currently pastor emeritus. And throughout his time, he's worked on issues of climate justice, both through his role as a pastor and with the national organizations like Sierra Club and Interfaith Power and Light and Climate Action Network, and proudly also with us at ecoAmerica. So he's truly a wealth of experience, wisdom, and motivation, as you will hear if you haven't heard him speak before. So hi, Dr. Durley. Good to see you.
Hello, how are you doing?
We're good, and we can see you.
Oh, you can see me. Good.
Oh, you're full scale now. And then also here with us in person is Charlotte Brody, the Vice President of Health Initiatives for BlueGreen Alliance. She's a registered nurse and spent much of her career working on behalf of the poor and vulnerable people. Her first job in the late 1960s was as a public health nurse in Appalachia. And she also helped create and work for years with the Carolina Brown Lung Association for better working conditions for textile workers. And for 12 years, she was the executive director of Piedmont Planned Parenthood Association, the first woman to ever be in this position. And she then was among the founders of Healthcare Without Harm, working to transform the health sector to no longer be the driver of emissions and pollution that harm health. And in 2010, Charlotte joined the BlueGreen Alliance, where she works to unify labor unions and environmental organizations for policy solutions that address shared goals of fighting climate change, protecting the health of people and the environment, and maintaining good paying jobs and economic security across the country. So welcome, Charlotte. All right, so we're gonna do more of a fireside chat. And I'll just kick off the questions to you and direct them towards you. How's that sound? Good. Okay, so the first is you're going to each answer this question, which is, how did you first engage in climate change? Like, what was your aha moment that really got you captured and made you feel compelled to join? I want to start with you, Charlotte.
Hi. You'll tell me back there when you don't hear me, right? You're the guide for all of this. So I was already working in toxics, and understanding how when something came up the smokestack, it didn't just disappear. It wasn't steam. It could include carcinogens and reproductive toxins and endocrine disruptors and chemicals that cause birth defects. So I already knew that cloud that came up wasn't just water. And so the idea that it not only harmed the health of people and the environment, it also was harming the climate made sense to me. And so it was just an expansion of the concerns that I was already working on, to include the harm that was happening to the climate, and that the solutions needed to be both, that we needed to find ways to make stuff, create energy that didn't also cause cancer or carbon destruction.
Absolutely. Dr. Durley.
Yes. First of all, let me thank ecoAmerica for all of the work that it has done over the last 15 or so years in bringing the awareness about what's going on in the climate and the environment. And Bob Perkowitz, you, Meighen, it means a lot to have been asked to be here. This is strange for me to be here today because climate change, global warming, environmental justice issues, they were far removed from me and my life. Those were extraneous kind of variables that I thought people who had a lot of money, who had a lot of time to walk around and look at trees and look at polar bears and look at the environment and talk about it. I was more concerned about justice. I was more concerned about police brutality. I was more concerned about equity in terms of employment. As you know, Meighen, I started with in the movement in 1960. I was 18 years old. John Lewis was 20. Andrew Young was 28 and Martin was 32. And we talked about it was a constitutional right for everyone to have voting rights, housing rights, employment rights, health rights. And we fought continuously for those particular rights, the voting rights bill, the housing rights bill, the employment bill. So climate change and environmental issues, they were far removed from the environment that I grew in. Yet I began to realize that minority communities were suffering more from climate change than and polluting the least, but being suffering the most. But it's interesting how you have that aha moment that you mentioned. It was the furthest thing from my mind. I had already been involved in the movement for 20 or 30 years, working in the streets, working political campaigns and all of that. And a lady came to Atlanta, a white lady. And she said, I'd like to work with teenage pregnancy here in the city of Atlanta, teenage young Black girls. And they asked me, would I go with her to a meeting? I didn't know the lady, but I went to the meeting because she was addressing a large group of white evangelicals about teenage pregnancy and what they could do from the various pulpits. And I stood there and listened for a few moments. I said, what am I doing here? All of these people. And the lady, she went on talking, but one of the men said, wait a minute, are you her bodyguard? And I questioned, why would I be her bodyguard? Because I'm 6'5" and Black? I didn't know. She said, no. I said, no, I can talk about teenage pregnancy and the disparity between the communities of color and the majority community. So I began to talk about justice issues. I began to talk about how laws have been put in place. I began to talk about that. and that entire room began to clap. Afterwards, the lady said, "Look, I'd like to introduce you to my husband." I said, "Okay." Now, the lady's name was Jane Fonda. Her husband was Ted Turner. They were here in Atlanta. She began to talk about climate justice and climate change and what it was doing in the African American community. They introduced me to a lady named Sally Bingham, who was out in California getting ready to start a program called Interfaith Power and Light. And there were different people. And then I met Laura Seidel, and I began to listen more. And I began to make the connection, that aha moment, that what we were doing in the civil rights movement could easily transfer into the environmental movement, because the same ingredients were there: justice, equity, clean energy, clean water. Everybody has a constitutional right for clean energy, clean water, and clean air. So I got deeply involved, and particularly in the African American community and in the religious community. And in those days, 13 years ago, it started off, we were just changing out light bulbs, and everybody was calling me the light bulb preacher. And they were laughing, not fluorescent. But I said, the light bulb, do you realize we're saving energy? And I was so uninitiated in those days. I initially started off calling it carbon monoxide rather than carbon dioxide. And then I began to learn more and more. And so then when Barack got ready to run, I began to talk to Barack Obama about this, and John Lewis, and then a young man that I installed here in Atlanta named Raphael Warnock. And Raphael got involved. And I began to, when I was there with Blessed America, Blessed Tomorrow in Washington, I began to learn so much. So I took it on as a personal challenge that we all have a we're in a moral ethical war that must be shored up by legislative power, that we all must work together, because no one can live and have their being if the climate is gone. And then I began to tie that into the spiritual part, that God created a perfectly balanced ecological world where animals and plants and water and air, and he gave us enough. But because of our greed, because of our wanting more and more, we began to destroy a perfectly balanced ecological world. So that moved me, that aha moment, that now I must combine the environmental movement with the civil rights movement, with justice issues, and understand the political nuances if we're now to really make a difference. And it's more important now, given the current situation in the country, than ever before, that now we must be more and more committed to making a change. And that the aha moment started 15 years ago. And I don't feel no way tired now. And I've been in the movement now, in the overall movement, since 1960. This is 2025. And I'm more excited now because we've got different ways of putting the information out. But Meighen, I'd like to say this to you and to Charlotte and others who are listening. This movement will only be as strong as and sustained by the enthusiasm of the people. When I first got in the movement, I met some of the dullest people I've ever met. They were intelligent and they were wealthy, but they were not excited. And what changes people's attitudes and what changes people to move and get involved in a movement, this is a movement now, is the enthusiasm that we must prevail. So that was my aha moment. And I'm still saying aha right now.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I feel like we need to harness some of his energy for a new renewable resource. It seems renewable. It seems.
Enthusiasm and what that means, or do you want to do your questions? You may have seen my face when you read my bio, because it's not the bio that I usually use.
I saw it, yeah. Okay.
And the bio I usually use starts with my volunteering with SNCC at the age of 6.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I took the bus downtown, and one of the things that I learned from SNCC was that the difference between backstage and onstage. So backstage, I'm typing thank you letters, and once they realized that I was good at arithmetic, they let me balance the checkbook in the days when you had to balance the checkbook by hand. And so I'm typing and subtracting and adding. And I'm listening to people talk about the deep divisions in strategy between SCLC, between Martin Luther King's organization and SNCC, and the bitterness people feel towards CORE and the way CORE is doing its work, and the effort to keep John Lewis from speaking at the March on Washington because they were afraid of what he would say. And so I'm absorbing all of this and then watching how those same people act when it matters, when it's on stage, and that the civil rights movement was impeccably united. And the arguments about whether it was the right time for Birmingham or the right time for Selma just were kept backstage, and people found a way to understand what really matters, right? To understand that the enthusiasm of people feeling like they were doing something transformational together through singing and through marching and through building strategies was much more important than what divided people. And that kind of both ability to recognize, as Bernice Johnson Reagan, who was a freedom singer.
Sweet Honey in the Rock.
Yes, and then became the leader of Sweet Honey in the Rock. Bernice liked to say that if you like everybody in the room, your coalition isn't big enough. And understanding that we have serious work to do, and that we both have to make people feel welcome and enthusiastic and inspired. And also understand that we're not going to like everybody in the room, and that's okay. That's what friends are for. Right? You can go out for a glass of wine and make fun of each other. But when it matters, we really need to be aligned.
Well, there were two words, and I was there when we formed SNCC at First Baptist Church in Nashville, Tennessee in '61. That was my sophomore year in college. And but the interesting thing, there were two words that you really understood. The two words that we were willing to do to go beyond our differences. I remember we didn't call him Whitney Young. We called him Whitey Young. We talked about Roy Wilkins. They were moving too slow. And John was kind of on their side. And we were trying to get John in with us. And you're right about the March on Washington the night before when they wanted to tone down his speech. We didn't think he should have toned it down. But the two words I think that are so apropos now, today, and then, what are you willing to sacrifice and what are you willing to risk? If you're not willing to sacrifice anything or risk anything, then you're not ready for the movement. And that might be as simple as somebody saying, we're getting ready to meet tonight, we're going to talk. And that person says, well, I'm going to a sorority meeting or a fraternity meeting. They're not willing to sacrifice. Those of us who were in the movement, we were willing to go all out, to give up a basketball scholarship. The night that the buses went and were burned, I missed the bus by almost 10 minutes because I did not leave basketball practice. But those that got on that bus and it was burned that night down there in Alabama, that was they were willing to give it all. And that's what it's going to take today. And I think as we look at even now what's going on with the government workers, what are they willing to sacrifice or risk? Are they willing to stay in there and go down on the mat for a cause that's just? We know the environmental movement. We knew and know that the civil rights movement is just. And we were willing to, if my mother got in my way, I'd have her, please, Mom, just sit down for a moment. I'll be back. This is not for you. Everybody can't do everything, but everybody has to know their role. Everybody couldn't go to jail. Everybody couldn't march. Everybody couldn't get up and speak. But once you knew your role, and you're right, there was a coordinated effort. But I think a lot of times the tension between the older guys, when I say the older guys, I mean like Andy was 28. Abernathy was in his 30s. C.T. Vivian was 34. Those older guys. So we had to, here's something that's very key. We had to learn something from them because we were ready to go gung-ho into this. And they said, well, look, let's take our time. Time for what? Look what these people are doing to us. I'll never forget what really turned me on. I was 18 years old coming from Denver, Colorado on a bus to play basketball at Tennessee State. And when I got to the Tennessee State line, the bus driver came and grabbed me by my collar and told me to go to the back of the bus. And I was getting ready to say something to him, but two ladies said, "No, young man, come back here." And that got me in, that was 1960. And I think right now we're at that same pivotal point. What are we willing to sacrifice and what are we willing to risk? When they marched in Montgomery, they were willing to sacrifice over 300 days walking in the street. And that's what we're going to do. I listened earlier to many of the programs and many of the panels, and a lot of the planetary information, the health information, we have got the information. The science is there. We know why the glaciers are melting. We know why the forest fires. We know why the hurricane. We have all of the information. Now, how do we garner that with the kinds of people that are willing to go down on the mat? That's a tricky thing, and you've got to be willing to go all out if we have the kind of effort. We can have all of the organizations, the Sierra Club, the Wildlife, ecoAmerica, IPL, but unless there's that coordinated effort to understand that we're all in this together, and it's bigger than the environment. This is actually survival of the planet, survival of the species, survival of the human race, survival of plants. And now, how do you get that? I think it comes, and you know this because you were there with SNCC, people have to take it personally. As long as I can be disconnected, and my house, the houses in California burned down, but my house didn't burn down. Forest fires, they mean nothing to me. As long as my house did not flood down in Arkansas, it doesn't mean anything to me. So we've got to put into people's minds and their spirits, their souls and their hearts, that this impacts all of us, not those that are directly impacted by the immediate impact of climate destruction, but those that are not directly impacted because they are directly impacted. It could be the air, it could be other things. So that's, I think, what we've got to do. And the time now, I'm more excited now than I was in 1963 because I'm seeing the marches begin to pop up. Why? Because people are directly negatively impacted. And that's what we got to do with the environment. Those that have been in flood areas, fire areas, hurricane areas, tornado areas, they understand it. When you go down to New Orleans, when you go down to Cancer Row in Louisiana, they understand. So we've got to now spread that message and pull our team, pull our unit together, even though there might be some differences of opinion as to how, but we got to get that kind of we're at a very critical point. I didn't mean to run my mouth so much, but I get excited about it.
You teed up the next question, which is, we're talking about learnings, and part of the learnings are setbacks, right? Everyone in this room recognizes we're in real fraught moment in our nation, at the federal level in particular, and then also in many states. What did you learn? You've been in fraught moments yourselves where it looked pretty dire. What did you learn from that experience? How can we learn? How did you move forward? What's your recommendations for the folks here working at the intersection of climate and health?
Is that to me or to Charlotte?
I only have Charlotte go first.
I think I've learned several times that it's not enough to protest. You also have to figure out collectively what you're trying to win and what needs to change so you can win. And that strategies need to be developed that actually get you closer to victory, and that do it in a way that builds power. So I worked for many years with Lois Gibbs at the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice, formerly Citizens Clearinghouse for Hazardous Waste. Lois Gibbs was a mother in Love Canal, New York, and found out that her house and the house of all of her neighbors was contaminated by chemicals that had been buried by a chemical company that then became part of Occidental, and that her kids were sick and other kids were sick and kids were dying from the exposures that were really coming up through the ventilation in the floors. Anyway, so one of the things I learned working with Lois and communities around the country who were fighting incinerators or the expansion of a landfill or a chemical plant like the ones in Cancer Alley that were making people sick, or PFAS in their water, is that it's not enough to know what's wrong. You then have to do the work of figuring out how do you stop what's wrong? Like, what are the solutions that are really out there to the problem? And then you have to figure out who has to change for that solution to be possible. And over and over again, I would be in situations where everybody agreed what was wrong, but no one agreed on how you fix it. And you can't really build a movement unless you have a story to tell about how this tragedy, this crisis, this sacrifice can end.
And I think it goes hand in hand with the kind of front stage, backstage, right? So in the environmental movement, you've got folks working against each other publicly. One will be advocating for one thing, and then someone will, at another environmental organization, will raise a flag and say, I don't want that, right? So you've got the vision and you've got the collaboration.
No, and I think you have to keep a key word is hope. I'll never forget when we used to get ready to go out to march, we'd all look around the room and we'd sing a song, Charlotte, as you know, we would sing a song. This may be the last time. This may be the last time, brother. This may be the last time. I don't know. And we would all laugh. And we said, now, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to face us. But we do know that right is on our side. We do know that justice is on our side. We do know that and right now we're in an ethical or moral war for the climate. So consequently, we used to say organize, strategize, and then mobilize. And Charlotte was right to have a strategy. We're in the middle of that right now as we look at the boycotting strategies that we're looking at for some of these major stores that have got rid of the DEI. I'm right back into it again with the DEI program, but we've got to have a unified front. That doesn't mean everybody agree, because some people, they have to take it from one side. We had certain young people that their tempers were too high. They would have to sit and run what we call a Gestetner machine, a mimeo machine, running off the papers to tell people where we're going to go. So I think, first of all, you must, for any movement to have take any hold, you've got to believe in the movement. When the homeless situation started off, we had a lot of homeless advocates getting on board, and they were turning in more and more grants to get more and more housing facility for the homeless, and it became a business. It became a business, and all kind of groups were coming up, and they were, all you had to do is look at the budget of where everything is to see what is the seriousness of making an absolute change in the situation, whatever it is, homelessness, childlessness, pregnancy, environment. So what we got to do now is to look at, everyone has a different role, but we're all going toward the same goal, that of mitigating climate change, and then putting it into, we used to say putting it into law. I learned one thing: you can put everything into law, but unless you change people's thoughts, their minds, the law is just the law. We're fighting the civil rights and the voting rights bill all over again after 65 years. We're fighting many of the things that we thought we had won. And it's going to be a cycle, but the only way we can win is to believe not only what we were doing then, but what we believe now. And I used to, in all of my meetings, when I was with IPL, I used to always say, never forget this. Never forget this. We are on the winning team. We are ethically right. We are morally just. This is our time. But we've got to stay in there when it seems so hopeless. When see, this is above Democrat, Republican. This is about not only democracy, but this is about a society that wants to live in an environment that gives clean air and water to all of us. And right now, it's about certain people who are after a certain profit level, who could drill if they want, who can open up the places up in Alaska. They don't care. We've got to be willing to stand up against those kinds of things. What do you mean? I don't want to get beaten. I might lose my job. What are you willing to sacrifice and what are you willing to risk? That's what the movement. And we'll see over the next several weeks, a lot of people now have been pushed to the point, you either tell me what you're doing or you're fired. That pushed them to the point, watch this, of a personal involvement. Movements stay strong when people are personally involved, willing to sacrifice, willing to risk. And sometimes you come back and you lick your wounds and you laugh and you say, well, wasn't that great tonight, but we'll be back tomorrow.
Amazing. Talk about the possibility at the state and local level, right? So in addition to keeping up the energy and keeping up the fight and the risk at the federal level, what have you learned about working in states and local communities? Darley, you want to start?
Well,
I think it's absolutely essential. And we had to bring other groups in, like in my particular case here, when we were talking about the climate efforts, and I was talking with the Planet Moms for Clean Air. So can you imagine the meeting with Moms for Clean Air, Captain Planet, and the Muslim community in that meeting? The Muslims were all coming. They were trying to make a connection between clean air and what they were doing, and in the Islamic community, in the Jewish community. So we had to bring an interfaith kind of effort to all of this. And to do that, one of the things that we know, we've got to look at the political situation. In our case, we were very fortunate to have progressive mayors from Andy to Maynard Jackson and all of them on there, but they were not involved in the movement until later on when Keisha Lance Bottoms got in. But the timing began to change because we began to see the kind of inequities that was going on in our community in terms of health care, in terms of access to health, in terms of the water, in terms of the waste dumps. So getting the local community, getting the local city council involved in our school systems, the kinds of schools that were there, the paint on the furniture, these kinds of things. When you tell a mother about the paint and the things in her apartment, she begins to make some understanding. Let's go to city council. Then from city council, then we can begin to look at our state representatives. We're very blessed to have Isop and Warnock here from our state senators that understand this. But even though they understand it, we realize that they're under political challenges there. So we have to stay on them from a point of saying, we're there with you. We're behind you. What is it that we can do? Where do we need to be? Do we need to stand up? You don't need to let them know that you told us to be there, but we will be there. That kind of I think, initiative at the local and the civic level. And another thing, one of the things we've got to understand that there is a deity, a God, an Allah, a Jehovah Jireh that's greater than us. And when people reach the lowest point, they reach up for something greater than themselves. So if we can get them to understand we are at a very dire, critical nexus point, and we might not have all the answers, but we do know who has the answers and who does have the answer. And that's how I tie the spiritual side into it with the civil rights side to it, to the environmental side, to get people involved. And it's another thing I found out, and I'm through, is that people, if they see something moving in a positive way, they don't want to be left out. And if you tell them, no, I'm sorry, you can't come. No, I want to come. No, you can't come. Not today. We're serious today. I want to be serious. Now you got a new recruit.
There you go. Volunteering someone. How about you, Charlotte?
So right now, we're involved in moving heat protections and some cold protections for workers in states. And it's because we were good participants in the Biden administration's effort to create an OSHA heat standard, right? We commented early, we went to the meetings, we submitted comments, we got other people to submit comments, all the things that you learn in activist school about how to make a difference. And then the rule wasn't finalized by January 20th. So in the first Trump administration, which I think we all agree was a less dangerous Trump administration than this one. In the first one, OSHA inspectors were at the lowest level in OSHA's 50-year history. So there's no reason to believe that this OSHA will be any better, right? So we've started working in New Mexico, Colorado, Iowa, Michigan, Minnesota, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Connecticut, New York. All of those places are moving state rules. And like I think most of you, I've spent a lot of my life calling people up or emailing them and nagging them to do something that they weren't expecting to do this week. And they already have full plates. And I have been ghosted as many times as anybody else in this room when I've asked people to do something that is a worthwhile thing, but not what they were planning on doing this week. But I've been really honored and pleased by how fast people have been responding. And I think it's Trump-Musk revenge, at work, that as we see things fall apart on the federal level, people want to do something that works. And I've long believed that we learn to win by winning. And so finding ways to move useful things at the city level, at the county level, at the corporate level, at the state level, is how we find our way out of this mess. And then when we retake the federal government, we'll know how to do more stuff.
Do you think that the local wins could snowball into federal, even within the current administration?
In two ways. I mean, I was involved for many years in trying to reform the Toxic Substances Control Act. And we built the momentum for that reform by creating different rules in different states and wanting to create, along with what was going on in the European Union, a little bit of chemical chaos. And we learned how to do that from the Right to Know movement, which had created different Right to Know laws in different states, thinking that then they could sort of arm wrestle the federal government into creating a rule. Fortunately, we didn't do TSCA reform when we had a trifecta and ended up with a crappy rule that now will become much crappier.
So are these-
how do you know you have a movement? All of these phone calls, all of these webinars, all of the different organizations, how do you know that critical point when you have, as they say, the critical mass, when you have that turning point where all of a sudden it shifted and as Charlotte was saying, and more people are getting involved. And here's what I thought about. Years ago, I think it was 1967 or 67, somewhere, we were marching in Cicero, Illinois, one of the worst sections of Illinois. Dr. King was marching along and the press stopped him. And we were just going along marching and people were throwing rocks and all of this. Now, here's the interesting point. How do you know you have a movement? And I learned that day. I've never forgotten it. They were stopping him, asking him, Dr. King, you've been staying in a tenement over there in Chicago, and now you're over in Cicero. Dr. King said, stop. I cannot give another interview. I will not answer another question. And here's what he said that has stuck with me for a long time. He said, I can't answer another question. Watch this. He said, I've got to go catch my people. You have a movement when you've done your work and the people are ready to march and go. Dr. King said, I got to go catch my people because everybody, we were marching on and he was in the back. answering questions. And he came up, he said, no, I've got, and so now whenever I'm doing, I'm so thrilled with these young people when they're using AI and other things that they're moving ahead, and I've got to catch up with them now. Once I know that I'm catching up with them, then we know that it is caught hold to what it is that we've got to do. When people are beginning to call you and say, what do we need to do? Where do we need to be? When do we need to be there? So that's why I said, and here's another thing, in our society, in the capitalist society, we become somewhat discouraged because we might not have gotten that grant. And I realize that it takes money to keep lights on and all of this. When I look back to what we really had, word of mouth, walking here, yes, times have changed and times are different. And I realize it's money. But a lot of times people will say, well, I don't know if we can keep going because we're short here, we're not there. It's nothing better than, and I know this sounds so trite, I hate to say it, but people power. That's what's keeping Ukraine going now, people power. And when the people believe in something, and that's one of our major roles with all the scientists, with all the climatologists, with all the organizations, how do we inspire? Inspire means to breathe, breathe into our people to believe. And once they get inspired, once they believe, then they have hope. And what is that hope? The hope that we will not be defeated. We will not back up. We will not bend. We will not bow, and we will not break. I don't know all of the answers, but I do know this. I do know that if we come together from our different points of view and stay there and understand all along, in particular what we're going into now, we're going to see so much money being thrown on the other side that is going to make our heads swim. From the oceans, from the bleaching of the corals, all of that. That's going to come from the drilling and fracking. It's going to come at an alarming rate, and that's why now we've got to really. And I'm not talking Pollyannish, running out, waving a flag, and all this. But I'm saying really getting in there and saying, what do we need to do? How do you do it? What are you willing to do? When are you going to do it? When do we do it? And realize that whenever you stand up, if everything is coming your way, you're in the wrong lane. And so it's got to be, we got to stand there, and somebody might ask the question, you might get fired. And I used to tell people, if I get fired, I was looking for a job when I found this one, because I believe, and that's when we got that, as Dr. King says, I've got to go catch my people.
How do we get more folks inspired to have the same drive and energy that you both have for your movements and for climate action? What's it going to take for us to bring more folks on board and feel that passion?
Unfortunately, tragedy. Unfortunately, George Floyd. I could name one of, when it came to police brutality, when they start putting it on video cameras and you could really see what we've seen all along. Then it got people and once people say this, watch this. I'm first time I think I'm ever saying this. When people say, hey, this issue around the environment, climate change, this is real. And once it becomes real in a person's life, then the excitement, Meighen, I think that's when it comes, where they might not know what to do. They might not know when to do it, but they know they have to do something. And that's when all of the people in this room there today who have some answers, who have some solutions, that's when we plug into it and we've got a movement.
I think also people need to feel that what they're doing matters.
That's right.
And that their work is valued. So that I get emails every day. I imagine all of the rest of you do too, that have this really impassioned statement of the problem. And what I'm supposed to do is write a check.
$5.
It's like, okay, but you can't build a movement of check writers. I guess nobody writes checks anymore. You can't build a movement of submit your donation here button pressers. That we have to find ways to involve people that spiral up, every step is a little bit more difficult than the one before, and that make people feel like they did something that mattered, and that someone noticed that they did something that mattered, and that there's a next step that requires a little bit more. I wanted, when I thought we were supposed to do slides for this, I was told I was supposed to do slides. I actually found a slide of the Young Lords Party, a Puerto Rican Liberation Party in New York that a few people here are old enough to remember. And but what I loved about the Young Lords was in part an answer to like two environmental groups disagreeing about what the solution should be. So there was a great split in the Black Panther Party, and the Young Lords wrote a letter that I only knew about because I was working for an underground newspaper, and I got to do the layout for the letter. And in this letter, they said, instead of fighting each other, what if you do what we do when we have a conflict, which is to see which strategy works on the streets, right? That instead of fighting each other, during the war in Vietnam, there were months spent arguing about whether the slogan should be out now or set the date, which really doesn't matter, right? But people were at each other's throats. And we do that all the time about carbon capture and everything else that like, you disagree with it, put your head down and move the solution that you think works. And if your solution turns out to be smarter than the other solution, it'll show in time. And we spend so much time, preparing for the coming battle with our enemies by fighting our friends. And it's just, they win when we do that.
You're right. And you said a key word. You said matters, that the work matters. I think there's a step before when we're organizing that the work matters, the mission matters, the purpose matters, but we've got to convince them that they matter.
We'll need to feel
that you matter. You are important. You are an integral part of this. And your role is so important. And once people get that feeling of somewhat empowerment, then it's like water. If you take water coming into a village and it's coming in unchecked, they call it a flood. But if you take that same H2O, that same volume of water and put boards around it, they call it irrigation. It's how we channel our energy right now. Is it a flood or is it irrigation? And right now, we've got to take all of this energy, good energy, from a lot of different points. I heard a lot of it today, and then channel that so that it begins to irrigate the crops, and then it can grow.
So I'm going to take a couple questions from the Q&A. One is, the formula for a successful movement is always changing, but what doesn't change? What can we rely on in a successful movement? Meaning, like, what makes a movement work, and what's reliable to make it work?
It has to have joy. I've been very concerned by how few good climate songs there are. There has to be joy, and joy often comes from singing together. I think there has to be leadership. It can be very democratic leadership, but I think someone has to be proposing strategy, and then some ones have to argue about whether it's a good idea or not. And I think, as the Reverend said, there has to be a recognition that there are lots of different components, and people are going to be good at different things, and that's what you need. And honor all of the different ways of contributing, including giving money.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Including
just,
the $5
can't just be giving money. Yeah.
Yeah, joy is a great word. Joy is a great word. I choose enthusiasm. Entheos means in God. And that's something greater than me when I'm ready to quit. But that excitement, you can't beat it. And as I said some years ago, when I first got into it, I was out at a meeting in New Mexico with some of the largest philanthropic people. I went out there with Laura Seidel and about 150 people. in this desert remote area, and they were talking about, this is 10 years ago, how can we, I'm talking about foundations, and they talked for 2 or 3 days, and it was really a lot of good information. You know how we do, put paper all around the wall with ideas, and paper all around the wall with ideas and all, and then we concretize it. So at the end, they said, "But Dr. Durley, you haven't had anything to add for the last couple of days." I said, "No, I was just learning, and I'm enamored by the multitude and the magnitude of what's going on here, and the amount of money and where you're going to put it. Ford Foundation, a lot of foundations. But one thing stands out to me is that as I leave here, he said, "What do you take away?" I said, "I take away a lot of information. I've met some friends, but I'm not excited. It's kind of dull to me. It's kind of dry." And then I started thinking, wait a minute. I'm thinking about a culture where we were under the gun with a George Wallace in that crowd. Maybe it's but no. The climate deniers are as strong as George Wallace right now. And I hate to single one man out. I could call the roll. But when I left there, I said, wow, how do you, and that's what I told him. I said, at the end, I just gave a little brief thing. I said, where iron sharpens iron, where you're talking about, well, my foundation can do this and your foundation can do this. But in order for it to happen, and then I said another thing, and going back to, stop putting all of your resources at the top organization so that at your board meeting, you can say, well, we did this. Put it down to some of these grassroots people where they're working every day. They're not stealing money. They're just barely making it, but put it down there because they can work at the grassroots level. They can work at the city council level. It gives them a chance because we respect them enough to say, now let's put it down, grants here and there down at that level so that you can continue to do what you've been called to do.
We've got a lot of more questions popped up, but I am mindful of time. So I just want to close with a question of anything else you want to share with this group as we move forward into this amazing year, hopefully with renewed energy. Anything else that you feel you want to share? Charlotte?
I'm the child of Holocaust survivors, and I took the bus to the SNCC office. I understand now. I didn't understand then because I couldn't save my parents, but I could do something similar. And for me, that was joining the civil rights movement. And I haven't been as afraid of fascism ever before as I am now. I don't think it was a mistake that Elon Musk put his hand out like this. So whatever you do on the local level, on the state level, on the federal level, we all need to do something. What happened in Germany happened because people thought it would pass, and that they should too many people put their heads down and thought, we'll get through this. And we can't let that happen again. So resist somehow, but resist.
Wonderful.
I couldn't disagree with her. I'm not a child of the Holocaust, but I'm a child of those, what they used to say, strange fruit hanging from a tree. That's what Billie Holiday sang about, strange fruit hanging from a tree. So consequently, I think she's exactly right, is that the kind of strength that we need now. Here's something else that Americans don't believe, and I think if we finally got it together, if you look at all the 16 great societies of the world, the Mongol, the Russian, the Grecian, the Roman Empire, and the greatest empire of all was the British Empire. They had 31 million miles around the world. The great empires, 16 of great empires, none of them were ever destroyed from the outside. All of them imploded. And I'm not a conspiracy theory, but right now, unless those in this room and around on this call get involved, America oddly enough, and we can't imagine it after only 249 years, that America is imploding. When we saw what happened at the White House the other day, when we see what's going on right now in Britain, and the Europeans and all that, it's imploding. But we can't believe that because other societies imploded, not us, but 16 of them. And the greatest one was the greatest empire, British Empire. So right now, we can put our finger in the dike and do the kinds of things that Charlotte talked about, the kinds of things so that we don't have the Holocaust efforts. We don't have the kind of injustice system when you sway a whole Supreme Court and then an entire Congress. The balance of nature is not balanced right now. It's unbalanced. So we've got to, in our own way, with what we have and what we believe in, we've got to now try to bring back the balance, the three balancing natures, the legislative, the executive, and the congressional branch. We've got to bring those back into play, because this is exactly what happened to all the empires that imploded. And so now we have that moral obligation. We have a legal obligation. If we're to leave the world and the environment, and I don't think you can separate the two to this generation that we do. And I say this at the end of all of my little messages. If I can, you can. If I can stand there, and my next birthday on May 11th, I will be 83 years old. And if I can stand there and gear up and pump up, and I told some young people, if I can stand there for 65 years, you can stand there for 60 minutes, 60 months. That would be my kind of concluding remarks. Stay in there. Don't give up. Don't bend. Don't bow. Don't break. And please don't back up. We need each other.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, thank you, Dr. Durley. Thank you, Charlotte. It's been an amazing session. I know some of your questions didn't get answered, but we will get them answered for you. Really, I just encourage everyone to think about what was said in this session. Hopefully you have a renewed sense of hope, a renewed sense of determination. We can't have climate or health without a functioning democracy. So we got our work cut out for us, and we'll stand up for at least 60 minutes or 60 months to make it happen. So thank you.
And guess what? It starts at this conference. It doesn't start tomorrow, next week. It starts with each of us. I'm stronger just talking to you all today. It starts with each of us individually, and it starts today. There is no tomorrow in the battle that we're in.
There we go. Thank you.